Imagine a world without clothes. For most of human history, our ancestors walked around naked. But at some point, they started covering up. Why? The answer lies in a combination of environmental pressures and social. The earliest clothing was likely made from animal skins and plant fibers. These materials provided protection from the elements, especially during the Ice Age, when temperatures dropped dramatically. But clothing wasn't just about survival. It also served a social purpose. Different groups began to decorate their garments with beads, feathers, and dyes, signaling identity, and over time, clothing became more complex. The invention of weaving allowed for fabrics like linen and wool, which were lighter and more comfortable than animal hides. Pressure, technological innovation, and social signaling. For millions of years, early hominins like Australopithecus and early Homo species were naked. They had body hair, but not enough to insulate against cold. They relied on their environment for warmth. They migrated with the seasons, built shelters, and controlled fire. Fire was a game changer. It allowed them to stay warm, cook food, and scare off predators, but it didn't replace the need for clothing. As Homo sapiens migrated out of Africa into colder climates, they faced a new challenge: survival in the Ice Age. The first clothing was likely made from animal hides. Using stone tools, early humans scraped the flesh off the skin, then draped it over their bodies. These were simple, functional garments, not fashion statements. But they made all the difference. With warm clothing, humans could survive in freezing temperatures, hunt in colder regions, and eventually settle in every continent except. But clothing wasn't just about survival. It also became a form of social signaling. Different groups decorated their garments with beads, feathers, and dyes. These decorations showed identity, status, and group membership. In a way, clothing became a language, a way to say who you were with. Early humans relied on behavior, seeking shelter, huddling together to stay warm. No one wore clothes. Then, around 170,000 years ago, something changed. Genetic studies of lice reveal a split between head lice and body lice. Body lice live in clothing, not hair. So their appearance means humans had started wearing clothes regularly. This genetic clue suggests that clothing became a regular part of human life, around 170,000 years ago. Body lice evolved to live in clothing, not just hair. This date is an estimate based on molecular clocks, but it's our best clue for when humans first wore garments. Why then? Around 170,000 years ago, the climate shifted dramatically. Ice sheets expanded, sea levels dropped, and much of Africa became cooler and drier. Forests shrank, savannas. Our ancestors, who had been living in warm forests, now faced colder nights on the open savanna. They needed protection from the cold. Clothing became a survival tool. But clothing wasn't just for warmth. It also protected against sun, insects, and thorns. And it may have served a social purpose, signaling group identity or status. The timing coincides with the last Ice Age, which began about 115,000 years ago. As Homo sapiens migrated out of Africa into colder regions of Europe and Asia, they faced freezing temperatures. To survive, they needed more than just fire. They needed clothing that could trap body heat and protect them from wind and snow. They learned to sew animal skins together using bone needles and sinew thread, creating layered outfits that provided insulation. These early garments were not just practical, they also allowed for personal expression. Different groups developed distinct styles, using feathers, shells, and pigments to decorate their clothes. Fur from hunted animals provided insulation. Early clothing was likely simple wraps or draped skin, but warmth wasn't the only driver. Clothing also protected from sun exposure, insect bites, and injuries during hunting. Early clothing was likely simple wraps or draped skins, but warmth wasn't the only driver. Clothing also protected from sun exposure, insect bites, and injuries during hunting. In some environments, sun protection was critical, so clothing served multiple survival functions. Around 40,000 years ago, a major technological leap occurred: the sewing needle. The oldest known needles, made from bone, allowed for tighter, more durable seams. This innovation meant clothing could be fitted to the body, improving insulation and movement. Or ivory date to this period. They allowed for fitted clothing, garments tailored to the body. This improved insulation and enabled more complex designs. With fitted clothing came new possibilities. Decorations, beads, dyed fibers became a way to express identity, status, and group belonging. These early fashion choices were not just about survival, they were about culture. Embroidery appeared. Clothing became a canvas for social identity. It signaled group membership, status, and personal style. This cultural function likely emerged alongside practical uses. So ancient humans started wearing clothes primarily for protection, but soon added layers of meaning. The first garments were simple, animal hides tied around the body. These hides were draped, not tailored. Over time, people learned to sew, creating fitted garments. The needle made from bone or antler was a revolutionary tool. With sewing came the ability to create layered clothing, essential for surviving ice ages. Warmth and mobility improved, allowing humans to migrate into colder regions. The story of clothing begins not with fashion, but with survival. Early humans needed protection from cold, sun, and insects. The first garments were likely animal hides draped over the body, held in place by simple ties or belts. The real breakthrough came with the invention of the needle. Around 40,000 years ago, humans crafted needles from bone or ivory, with a tiny hole to thread sinew or plant fibers. This allowed them to sew fitted garments, trapping body heat. But how do we know when humans first started wearing clothes? The answer is surprisingly small: lice. Body lice evolved from head lice only after humans began wearing garments regularly. Genetic studies date this split to around 170,000 years ago, giving us a firm timeline for clothing. The next time you put on a shirt, remember, you're wearing the legacy of an Ice Age innovation, and a tiny louse helped us figure it out.